So there's a lot of people out there that believe research is just really important when it comes to trading, and I have to say, there's different sides of the coin on both of these things. That some people will say research is really important. I will say, in my case, from what I've seen over the years, it's not as important. If you've done a lot of research before and you get into a stock, there are cases when, hey, Steve Jobs announced he had cancer, and if we look at those kinds of moments, even if you've researched the stock to death, and you talked about like Steve Jobs the day he announced cancer, in these kinds of moments, you really get to see that even if you researched as much as you could about the company, there are moments like this that happen that is just, hey, it's unexpected, and all of a sudden then the stock could tank, it could plummet. Of course it recovered later on, but the point being here is that no matter how much you research, there's certain things you still will not know. Now, when we look at these kinds of things, and I see these in questions where people say research is so important, who do you use for additional insight on stocks? For example, Motley Fool and maybe some others out there. And I will say, in most cases, it's not as important as people think. Is it wise to do that if you're kind of, let's say, new to trading and investing? Yes. But in many cases, if you're not holding the position for longer than a year, research is probably not as important. What's more important is actually learning to spread money and capital and positions in different zones, different areas, different quadrants, not putting money in one spot at one time. That's probably more critical than actually the research, because there's a few big issues when it comes to research. One of those issues is that there's so much news and content, we now have information overload. So going back to kind of our Apple example here, when we go into Apple stock news, there's just so many things. Apple stops offering buy now, pay later. So what does this now mean? So there's just so many articles in there that now you have to sort and digest this information. And even then, now you have to make a trade decision and execution with so much information, you have to process that. So that's kind of one big issue. Now, with all of this information coming in, you're going to also get some emotional biases that can push you to one side. So when you start looking at this, let's say you're looking at a news article or doing some research on it, or Apple saying things, now you have to say, okay, well, as you look into this, what is the article, the emotion of this article? How is it hitting me and affecting me? Now, you might say it doesn't affect you as much, but there's people maybe saying, hey, this is not good because now it won't allow this. We will no longer offer Apple Pay. Apple users said they wanted installment plans. So this could be bad for the company. On the other hand, from a stock basis, it could be a good thing because they save money or time or whatever the case is. So these emotional biases could play a big role in your decision-making factor. But again, you've got so much information in there. There's also, when it comes to a lot of these news and events and catalysts, similar to what happened with Apple, and I'm just using Apple as an example, like this news catalyst, just like when Steve Jobs announced cancer, you've got other things that could happen. Unexpected events or situations do happen. So how would you have known that something like this moved, exploded, and would have went? You don't. Or same thing on the downside. It could happen at any time. So unexpected things do happen. If you look back into the day on, if you guys recall, the Enron problem or scandal and debacle, so when we look at all of this 22 years later after the $63 billion Enron collapse, oh my goodness, this was pretty crazy. And I think there was also a thing, investment, Goldman Sachs, what was it, a railroad related thing, investments that even they did. I have to recall, there's something nasty that they did a bad investment on. I can't recall exactly, or pipeline. I don't know. But anyway, you just never know when things are kind of nasty. It hits and you've got a problem. You just don't know when things will happen. And that's the thing with you could research all you want, but unexpected crap happens all the time. Let's look at kind of another reason here regarding research. You can't always time it correctly. So, a certain company might say, like we've got AI going on. So let's say like Apple's got some kind of AI deal or thing going down, and they might mention it here. but you just don't know if you can time it for when the stock is actually going to explode. So even though they might be talking about it, but it actually might move. You have no idea. So this is one of the things, is that no matter how much you research, there's moments in the market that just happen when they happen. People get cancer, just like Steve Jobs there, when they happen, or you have a heart attack when it happens. It just, by happenstance, this is what goes on, and you just don't really know. So you can't time it perfectly. So the important part is spreading money, spreading capital, and positioning yourself for a possible move in your favor. But again, you just don't know. Okay, here's another one that kind of is interesting, and that is, the more you read or hear things, you tend to have a herd mentality. So if you keep reading about, let's say, Apple AI, I tend to see this a lot with like Facebook groups, those kinds of things, or like any kind of advertising. So the more like you click around things, and I pretty much click like all the ads there are on Facebook. So they send me all kinds of weird things all the time, because I just click every ad to see the advertising or the marketing or how things are done. It's just kind of fascinating to me. But the more you click on things, all of a sudden they kind of push more and more of that in your feed. So in my case right now, recently, I've been pushing a lot of like service businesses or window washing businesses. And so they're talking to me about like, hey, do you want to start a window washing business or a painting business? And it's interesting. So the more like you read about like Apple stock, and like you start seeing more positive things and more things here going on, the more you actually believe in the hype, and you become part of the herd, and you kind of, yeah, that's right. It kind of reaffirms that, kind of like confirmation bias. And that can be a problem, because now you're not making decisions based on strategy, based on spreading your money, your risk levels, your risk tolerance. You're actually buying into a story, which is not always what you want to do when it comes to investing, right? The goal of the business is manage risk, manage money, manage positions, and then, buy things at a lower price, sell it at a higher price. But here, when we start believing in stories, the problem happens where now you get more emotional to it. And then all of a sudden, well, you invest more than you should have, or things don't turn out the way you think, and you get attached to it. And attachment usually leads to more, problems later on, because now, well, just like in relationships or, in scams, we get kind of attached. And if the scam builds up over time, then, it wipes you out a little bit more. Rather than like, hey, yeah, sure, I'll buy a $5 coffee or $10 coffee or whatever. Yeah, big deal. Oh, it tasted horrible. Okay, no big deal. Anyway, so the more that you hear these things, the more that you're aware of them, it kind of reaffirms these things. And the last point here that I'll go to is misinterpretation of the information can also occur as you receive the data. So even though there might be some information out here, whether that's Apple, it could be Nvidia, it could be any stock for that matter, it could be just overall in the market. Then what happens is just you're absorbing all of this information, and you might interpret it incorrectly. You have to now digest it, all this data that you have, because now you're getting data points. You got data point. And now what is the end result of all this data? Are you really bullish or bearish? Okay, because if they're all neutral and they're, giving you some numbers, is it really bullish or bearish? I like to think of it kind of like, it's really interesting to me. Like if you put a kid in the forest and you give them like, 5 or 6 religions to choose from, without any communication, without any, words or language, without him or them knowing their parents, which religion would they choose, right? I kind of look at it this way, or even food. Let's say they never had food in their life and they're like 10 years old and now they can walk and choose. Which food would they choose? So it kind of is an interesting thing, because you find that with time, just like kids, they get exposed to the foods or the religions that parents are there. And not to push one way or the other on the religion, but I'm just saying, like, let's look at just the food perspective. Usually you get pushed the food that your parents eat. So the more you see that and exposed, kids will model that. And this is what happens here, is that we can misinterpret some information because we get pushed on it from all these different issues that can arise. So be mindful of this, and be careful when you're looking at, stock news, and we're looking at, hey, research. What are you researching? Are you researching probability, statistics, the chance of things going against you, how high we are in terms of price or how low we are? those kinds of things? Or are we looking at company news, events, and those things? Because that has a lot more emotions. In the same concept of, if I go in and tell you, hey, what's your favorite red or color red? And we look at the shades of red, and we look at an image, for different people, red could mean so many different things. Now, true red here, when we look at, call it a hexadecimal for web designing, would be this one. But there's other shades of red, and I might say, you know what, I really like candy apple red. Or other people say, hey, I like the Venetian red. So red to you might mean a different thing, and hopefully you're not, red-green colorblind or color deficient. So that could also impact your judgment as well. So my point being here is that there's a lot of interpretations for stocks and the news and so on. And usually it's not the thing to go with when it comes to making investment decisions, at least not if you're trading and investing for less than a year. Once you go into longer depth and a longer hold time, and you're doing large positions, like let's say you're like 2% of the company or 5% of the company and you're big ownership, then that's a whole different story. But for most people, what matters more is properly positioning and allocating your money in the right spots, different areas in different days of the week and time and month, and you'll be a lot better off. Anyways, thanks for joining me. Truly appreciate it. Feel free to check out the coaching sections of our website. There's a lot of things that we do with people, even one-on-one and group coaching. And really, if you want to learn this business the right way, where you get some personal attention, feel free to reach out. Anyways, thanks for joining me. I'll see you in the next one.